You want to know the exact moment the world changed. It wasn't a mushroom cloud. It wasn't a fleet blotting out the sun like in the films. It was a Tuesday, and it was quiet. I remember because I was making tea. The kettle was still ticking as it cooled when every screen on the planet went the same shade of gray at the same second. Phones, billboards, the little cracked telly in the sergeant's mess at Campbell Barracks. All of it. No warning, no static, no countdown. Just gray, and then a voice that didn't come from the speakers so much as arrive inside your skull, the way a bad memory does. It didn't shout. That's the part nobody tells you, right? It was gentle, almost bored. Population of the third world. Your tenancy has been reviewed. You have 270 days to vacate. This is a courtesy. Then the gray went away and my tea was cold, and the kettle had stopped ticking, and I was standing in my kitchen in Swanbourne with my heart going like a fist on a door. 270 days, 9 months. Nobody knew what vacate meant. Not at first. Some blokes reckon it was a hoax, some clever rich prick with more satellites than sense. That lasted about 4 hours, because at 2100 hours Perth time, the thing they'd left in orbit lit up over the Nullarbor and burned a perfect circle into the desert 40 kilometers wide. No debris, no crater rim, just glass. Smooth as a mirror, still warm 3 days later when the first land cruisers reached it. They weren't threatening us. That was the horrible thing. You threaten someone you're worried about. They were just showing us the eviction notice had teeth. The way you'd show a tenant the locks you're going to change. My name's Bloom. Corporal back then, though rank stopped mattering pretty quick. I was Special Air Service Regiment, Perth, and I'm telling you all this from the far side of it so you already know I lived. That's not a spoiler. The dead don't do interviews. But 8 of us went up. 8. Against a thing that could turn a chunk of Australia into a windscreen without breaking a sweat. The collected governments of Earth, every navy, every air force, every silo full of warheads, scratched their heads for 6 months and then did the maths and realized the maths didn't work. You can't nuke something you can't reach. You can't outshoot a landlord who owns the building. The Americans lost 60 aircraft in the first week just trying to get close enough to look at the ship. The thing didn't even shoot back. It just existed harder than they did, and their jets fell out of the sky like moths off a hot bulb. So when the call came down, it wasn't a war plan. It was a burglary. Get inside, find the thing that runs the clock, turn it off. 8 men, 1 stolen ride. 9 months on the timer, and by the time we got the green light, 4 of those months were already gone. Let me tell you how it started properly, not the gray screens, the bit that mattered. The bit where a bloke I'd known for 11 years sat across from me in a briefing room that smelled of instant coffee and diesel, and told me we were going to steal a spaceship. Chapter 1, 8 NAMES on a whiteboard. The room had no windows. That was deliberate. By month 4, windows were a bad idea everywhere. People had started doing things to themselves when they could see the sky and remember what was parked in it. There were maybe a dozen of us in there when I came in, but only 8 names on the whiteboard, written in the squadron sergeant major's ugly capitals. I read them before I read anything else, the way you always do, looking for your own. Mine was 3rd from the top. Bloom. Under it VANC, OKFOR, LINDQVIST, TRAN, Baker, the Padre, WULF. I want you to sit with those names for a second, because by the end of this I'll have lost some of them and you should know them before that happens. That's only fair. Vance was the boss, warrant officer class 2, a Kiwi by birth who'd been in the regiment so long the accent had worn off him like tread off a tire. Square-built, gray at the temples, hands like he'd been shaking rocks apart his whole life. He didn't raise his voice, ever. When Vance got quiet, you got quiet. Okafor was our medic and the biggest human being I have ever personally stood beside. Nigerian-Australian from Blackton in Sydney, laughed like a landslide, and could put a chest drain in a bloke under fire without spilling his brew. We used to say if the war ever came to hand, we'd just push Akafor at it. Lindqvist was the sniper, quiet Swede, third-generation Aussie, face like he was always doing sums. You could set a watch by him. You could set your life by him, and more than once I did. Tran was comms and electronic warfare, small and fast and permanently annoyed, the sort of bloke who fixed things by insulting them until they worked. If it had a wire in it, Tran owned it. Baker was the youngest, demolitions, grinned too much, kept a photo of his mum laminated in his breast pocket and didn't care who saw it. The padre wasn't really a padre. His name was Sayoni, big Tongan lad, and he'd trained as a chaplain years back before switching to the assault trade. The name stuck. He carried a little Bible and a very large gun, and saw no contradiction in either. And Wolf, I'll get to Wolf. Vance let us all read the board. Then he capped the marker and turned around and said, "Righto, you've seen the news." Someone laughed. It wasn't a good laugh. "They're not sending a fleet," Vance said. "There's no fleet to send that works. You've watched the Yanks find that out the hard way. Every conventional option's been tried, and every conventional option is a smoking hole in the ground now." He tapped the desk. So the eggheads changed the question. Stopped asking how do we beat it. Started asking how do we board it. Tran spoke up because Tran always spoke up. Board it with what, boss? It shrugged off a carrier group. "With 8 blokes it won't be looking for," Vance said. And that landed in the room like a dropped rifle. Because that was the whole plan, wasn't it? That was the entire insane thread the last hope of the human species was hanging off. Something that big, that arrogant, that certain. It wasn't watching for 8 men. It wasn't watching for anyone. You don't check under the fridge for mice when you're planning to demolish the house. They'd found a way up. That was the part they wouldn't fully explain, not then. All Vance would say was that there was a ride, that it wasn't ours originally, and that some very brave and very dead people had already paid the deposit on it. I found out later what he meant. I'll tell you when we get there. It still gets me, that bit. Here's the thing about being told you're going to die. Everyone thinks they know how they'd take it. Everyone's got a picture in their head, stoic or weeping or getting drunk and calling their ex. But the truth is far stupider and far more human than any of that. When Vance finished laying it out, when the full shape of it was on the table, one-way odds, no extraction plan worth the name, a target nobody had even seen the inside of, the first thing that happened wasn't fear. It was Baker asking if there'd be time to ring his mum. And Vance, who had never in 11 years given me a soft answer to anything, looked at that grinning kid and said, "Yeah, mate, we'll make time." That's when I knew it was real, not the whiteboard, not the glass desert, that. They gave us 3 weeks. 3 weeks to prep for the most important break-and-enter in the history of the species, and most of it was spent on things that sound boring until you realize your life hangs off them. Fitting kit, testing seals, learning, over and over, the layout of a ship none of us had ever seen from the inside, built from what little the sensor boffins had scraped together. Guesses, mostly, shadows and heat blooms, and the one grainy pass a dying satellite had managed before the ship swatted it. The ship, I should describe it, because you've probably got the wrong idea. It wasn't sleek. Films always make them sleek. This thing looked grown, not built, black and matte and vaguely wrong, the way a deep-sea fish is wrong, all the proportions off by just enough to make your eyes slide away from it. It hung over the southern hemisphere and didn't orbit so much as sit, ignoring physics the way a landlord ignores your emails. 14 kilometers long. You could see it from the ground on a clear night, a dark absence where stars should have been, and people had stopped looking up because of it. We looked up plenty. It was going to be our front door. Tran spent those 3 weeks with the captured tech. That's the part I can finally tell you. The ride wasn't a rocket. Months back, one of the alien landers, a scout, a beetle black thing the size of a bus, had come down over the Kimberley, and a mixed mob of SAS and Yank Delta had done something no one thought possible. They'd killed it. Killed the crew, took the lander mostly intact, and lost 14 good people doing it. 14 for one bus-sized ship. That was the deposit Vance meant. 14 dead so 8 of us could have a key. Tran and the Boffins had spent months since then learning to fly the thing without understanding a word of how it worked. Like teaching a caveman to drive by trial and error, except every wrong turn might vaporize the county. He got it working. Don't ask me how. I watched him do it and I still couldn't tell you. He talked to it in this low, filthy, affectionate mutter, calling it every name under the sun, and slowly, sullenly, it would do what he wanted. The theory was elegant and horrible. The mothership let its own landers dock without challenge. Why would it check? Nothing hostile could possibly be flying one of its children. So we'd go up in a stolen alien craft, squawking whatever the alien equivalent of the right password was, and if the theory held, the front door would open for us like we belonged. If the theory didn't hold, we'd find out at 14 clicks up with no way down. Comforting, said Baker, when Vance laid it out. Isn't it, said Vance. The night before, we didn't sleep. None of us even pretended. Akafor cooked. God knows where he got the ingredients. By month 5, a proper feed was worth more than gold. But he did jollof rice and something with chili that took the roof off your mouth, and we ate it in the hangar under the black shape of the lander like it was Christmas. Sione said grace. Nobody took the piss. By then even the atheists among us had gone quiet on the subject. Baker rang his mum. Went outside to do it, came back with his eyes red and his grin fixed on like a bayonet, and nobody said a word about either. Lindqvist cleaned his rifle. He didn't need to. It was already clean. But some blokes pray with their hands. And Wolf sat apart like always, and I finally went and sat with him, because I'd figured out by then that somebody had to, and it was going to be me. Wolf was the one they'd added last. Not regiment. Not properly. He'd come across from some other program, something the government didn't have a name for on any form you were allowed to read, and he was on that whiteboard because he'd been inside a captured alien craft longer than any human alive and walked out still able to talk. The others didn't trust him. Fair enough. He didn't blink enough and he knew things he shouldn't, and once, in a language none of us recognized, I'd heard him answer a question nobody had asked out loud. I sat down next to him and offered him some of Akafor's rice. He looked at it for a long moment like he'd forgotten what food was for. You don't have to come, you know, I said. None of us do, nobody'd blame you. He took the plate, held it, didn't eat. You think I'm afraid, he said. I think everyone's afraid, only sane thing to be. He shook his head slowly, and when he looked at me his eyes had that too still quality, like water in a tank. I'm not afraid of dying up there, Bloom, he said. I'm afraid of what I'll remember when I see it again. I didn't have anything for that. So I just sat with him, and after a while he ate the rice, and that was somehow the most human thing I saw anybody do that whole night. Morning came the way it always does, indifferent. We suited up in the dark. The kit was half ours and half cobbled from the reverse-engineered stuff, seals and rebreathers rated for God knew what because nobody knew what the inside of that ship would try to do to a human lung. Heavy. Awkward. Vance walked the line and checked every man himself, tugging straps, thumping chest plates, saying almost nothing, and when he got to me he stopped and looked at me for a second longer than the others. You right, Bloom? No, I said. He almost smiled. Good. Blokes who reckon they're right about this are the ones I worry about. Then he stood back and looked at all 8 of us, kitted and grim under the belly of a stolen alien ship, and he said the only speech I ever heard him give. I'm not going to tell you we're going to win. I don't know that. Nobody knows that. He let it sit. What I know is there's 7 billion people down here who have spent 5 months waiting to die with their hands in their pockets, and this morning 8 of them aren't going to. He nodded once like he'd settled something with himself. That's us. Mount up." We climbed into the dark of the lander. Tran started to mutter, low and filthy and loving. Somewhere far below us, a whole planet was waking up to another day of its allotted 9 months, and most of them would never know we'd gone. The hatch sealed, the floor pushed up against my boots, and we went up to knock on the door. RSD part of going to space isn't the going. It's the waiting to find out if you were right. We climbed for 11 minutes. I know it was 11 because I counted, the way you count when there's nothing else to hold onto. No windows in the lander. The aliens didn't seem to believe in them, and honestly by then neither did we. So all we had was the shudder of the hull and Tran's voice up front, that low, ugly stream of endearments and threats he fed the machine to keep it sweet. "Come on, you black-hearted bucket. That's it. Good, don't you dare." "Good." The rest of us sat strapped in the dark and didn't talk. There's a particular silence men make when they've all privately decided they're probably going to die and have chosen not to burden each other with it. It's a considerate silence, almost polite. Baker broke it once. "Anyone else need a wee?" Akafer's laugh rolled through the compartment like weather, and for about 4 seconds we were just 8 blokes in a truck again, and then the lander lurched and we weren't. "That's it," Tran said, and his voice had gone thin. "That's the challenge, it's talking to us." Vance leaned forward, and I'm answering it with a recording of a conversation I don't understand, that I stole off a dead thing, that I'm playing back and hoping means, "Let me in, and not shoot me now." Tran's hands were moving fast over controls that lit up in colors I didn't have names for. So if everyone could hold very still and think encouraging thoughts, that'd be tremendous. I held very still. I thought the most encouraging thoughts I had. They were mostly about my sister's kids in Fremantle and whether they'd get another birthday. The lander stopped shuddering. That was worse than the shuddering. The shuddering meant we were still fighting the sky. The stillness meant something had taken hold of us, something bigger. I felt it in my back teeth, a pressure, a grip, like the whole craft had been picked up by a hand the size of a suburb. "It's got us," Tran whispered. "Tractor of some kind, it's pulling us in." "Willingly," Vance said, "or the other way." "Boss, I genuinely can't tell, and I don't think it makes a difference to us right now." Nobody said anything after that. We just felt ourselves being drawn upward and inward, toward the black shape that had been squatting over our lives for 5 months, and I remember thinking, very clearly, the way you think stupid clear things at times like that. I never fixed the gutter. I'd been meaning to fix the gutter on my house in Swanbourne for 2 years. And I was about to die 14 kilometers above the earth in a stolen spaceship, and the thing my brain handed me was the bloody gutter. Sione must have seen something in my face. He reached across the aisle and put one enormous hand on my forearm. Didn't say anything, just left it there. The Padre never needed words to do the work words do. Then the pressure changed. A give, a release, the grip letting go, and Tran said the word I'll remember till I die. "We're in." The hatch didn't open so much as decide to no longer be a hatch. 1 second it was a wall. Then it wasn't, the material peeling back and away in a manner that made my eyes water to watch, and past it was. Not what I expected. I don't know what I expected. Something metal, something machined. Gray corridors and blinking lights. The way films train you to imagine the inside of a spaceship. It was a cathedral. That's the closest word I have. We came out into a space so vast the far walls vanished into a kind of dark haze, ribbed and vaulted overhead like the inside of some colossal ribcage, and it was warm, and it was wet, not water, but a heaviness to the air, humid, organic. It didn't smell like a machine. It smelled like the inside of a living thing. Copper and salt and something underneath that the animal part of my brain read instantly as predator, as run, a smell older than language. The walls were not still, they moved. Slowly, the way a sleeping chest moves, the whole vast space breathing around us, and lit from within by a dull red glow that pulsed. I counted it, about once every 4 seconds. Like a heartbeat slowed right down. We came off the lander in a stack, weapons up, and we did it clean and silent because that was the one thing in the universe we knew how to do. 8 men flowing out into the impossible, boots making no sound on a floor that gave slightly underfoot like packed muscle, and every one of us running the same private calculation. This is not a ship. This is a body, and we are inside it. Vance's voice came over the net, barely a breath. Eyes, anybody, talk to me. No contacts, Lindqvist murmured. He'd already gone to a knee, rifle sweeping the impossible distances. No movement. But I don't like the sightlines. Everything's curved. Nothing straight in here. Tran comms. Dead boss, nothing in, nothing out. We're on our own from here. A pause. There's something else. My gear's picking up, I don't know how to say this. Signals everywhere, like the whole ship is thinking and we're standing inside the thought. Wolf, Vance said. You've been in one of these, smaller. Tell me what I'm looking at. Wolf had come off the lander last and he'd stopped a few paces out and he was just looking, turning slowly. And on his face was the strangest expression I have ever seen on a human being. It wasn't fear. I'd have understood fear. It was recognition. It's awake, he said quietly. The little one I was in, it was dormant, asleep. This one's awake and it knows we're here. He turned to Vance and his 2 still eyes were wet. It's known since we docked, it let us in. The red light pulsed, once, twice. Why would it let us in? Baker said, and his voice cracked on it, young and scared and trying so hard not to be. Wolf looked at him almost gently. Because it's curious, he said. It's never seen anything like us do something this stupid before. Chapter 3, The Long Dark. We moved because moving was the only answer we had. Vance picked a direction. There wasn't a good way to choose, so he chose the way the ship seemed to want us to go, which sounds mad but you could feel it. A widening in the vast rib-vaulted dark, a path of least resistance, and Vance clocked it and said, It's hurting us. Fine. We'll walk into the parlor, but we walk in our way on our feet, eyes open. And we went. I want to tell you how long we walked, but time did strange things in there. My watch said 40 minutes. My legs said 4 hours. The red heartbeat light never changed its rhythm, and there was no horizon, no landmark, just the endless breathing dark and the give of the floor and the sound of our own breath in our rebreathers. 8 men going deeper into something the size of a city that was alive and awake and interested. Baker started talking, low to himself at first, then to whoever'd listen. He did that when he was scared. Some blokes go quiet, some go inward. Baker went out. He'd chatter, tell you about his mum's garden, about a dog he'd had as a kid, about anything at all. And normally it grated, but that day I'd have followed the sound of his voice off a cliff. It was the most human thing in 14 kilometers of alien dark. And she does these roses, right, my mum, out the back, and everyone in the street's jealous because she won't tell 'em her trick. And the trick's just banana peels, that's it. You bury banana peels round the roots. Baker, Lindqvist said, not unkindly. Yeah, sorry. No, said the Swede. Keep going, banana peels, then what? And Baker, understanding, kept going, and Lindqvist let him. That was Lindqvist all over. The man could put a round through a coin at 800 meters, and he understood exactly why a scared kid needed to talk about his mum's roses. Discipline isn't just about being hard. The best of them knew that. Then the ship showed us the first room. It opened up ahead of us the way the hatch had, a wall deciding to stop being a wall, and past it was a chamber, smaller, maybe the size of a school hall, and it was full of them. Not moving, not attacking, held. Along the walls, in translucent sacks that pulsed with the same red light, hung shapes, human shapes. Dozens of them, suspended in something clear and thick, and my stomach dropped through the floor because for one horrible second I thought they were alive. I thought we'd found people. And then Akafor moved past me with his medic's instinct already engaged and pressed a gloved hand to one of the sacks and went very, very still. "Boss," he said, his big voice had gone small, "these are ours." "Alive," Vance said. "No," Akafor didn't look away from the shape in the sack. "Long time no, but they're not decayed, they're kept, preserved, like," he stopped, started again, "like specimens." We understood then all at once, the eight of us, what we were looking at. Not a prison, not a morgue. A collection. The people from the lander they'd killed over the Kimberley. And others. God knows how many others, plucked up over 5 months, studied, filed, kept. The landlord had been taking inventory. Learning us. That's how they'd known so precisely what 9 months would do, what vacate would cost, what buttons to press. They'd been reading us the way you read a manual before you throw the appliance out. Sayoni began very quietly to pray, in Tongan, then in English, then in something that was just sound. And Baker had stopped talking about roses. And Wolf. Wolf walked to one of the sacks and put both hands against it and said a name. We all heard it, a name, a woman's name. "You knew her," I said. He didn't turn around. "She was in the program with me," he said. "The Kimberley one. They told us 14 died taking the lander." His shoulders moved. "They didn't tell us it wasn't dying they were worried about, it was this." He pressed his forehead to the sack. "They took her whole. That's what the little ship was doing when they found me. It was harvesting." The red light pulsed, once, twice, patient as a landlord. And Vance, God bless Vance, who never raised his voice, who I'd followed for 11 years, stepped into the middle of that terrible room and said the thing that put the spine back in all of us. Right, quiet, flat, absolute. Now we know what it does. Now we know what happens if we fail, so we're not going to fail. He looked at each of us in turn and last of all at Wolf, still pressed to the glass. "We came up here to turn off a clock. That clock's in this thing's head somewhere, and this thing's got a head because it's got a mind. Tran can hear it thinking." He racked nothing. There was nothing to rack, but the sound of his certainty was the same. "So we go up the spine, we find the brain, and we put 8 men's worth of Australia right through the middle of it." Baker wiped his face with the back of his glove. "For the roses," he said. It came out shaky. It came out like a vow. "For the roses," said Lindqvist, dead serious. "And I swear to you, in that room full of our stolen dead, 8 terrified men found something that was better than not being afraid. We found purpose. The oldest human trick there is, the one where you take the fear and you sharpen it and you point it at the thing that made it. We left the collection behind us. Akafor was the last out. He stopped at the door and looked back at the rows of kept faces and said softly, "We'll come back for you, one way or another." Then he followed us into the dark. Ahead the ship's breathing had changed. Tran caught it first. His gear lit up, that storm of alien thought spiking, and he grabbed Vance's arm. "Boss." It felt that. It felt us decide. The signals just, everything just changed. It's not curious anymore. The red light, which had pulsed once every 4 seconds since we'd come aboard, patient and slow and certain, stuttered. And then, for the first time, it went fast. Somewhere far above us in the endless dark, up the great breathing spine of a thing that had given our whole species 9 months to die, something enormous woke all the way up and started coming down to meet us. Contact, Lindqvist breathed, rifle rising toward a sound none of us could see yet. "Boss, something's coming, something big." Vance keyed the net one last time before it started. "Nobody dies for free," he said. "Make it earn every one of us. I've been shot at on 4 continents. I've been in rooms where the math said I shouldn't have walked out. And I'm telling you that nothing in my life prepared me for the sound of that thing coming down the dark. It wasn't a roar. I'd have taken a roar. A roar's an animal, and animals I understand. This was a dragging. A wet, heavy, many-legged dragging, and underneath it a sound like someone slowly tearing a sheet of steel in half, on and on, coming closer, and the red light strobing now, fast and furious, painting the ribbed walls in stutters so we saw it in pieces. It came into the light legs first. Too many of them. That's the thing that broke something in the back of my head. I counted, I couldn't help counting, and I lost count. And things you can't count are things that shouldn't be. It filled the passage wall to wall, black and glistening and wrong, and where its face should have been there was just a cluster, a knot of sensing parts that all turned toward us at once, and it saw us, and it did not care about us the way you do not care about the ant on the footpath. The landlord had sent someone to deal with the mice. Contact front, Vance's voice iron, LINDQVIST. The Swede was already firing. I want you to understand what Lindqvist did because it's the kind of thing that gets lost when people tell these stories big. He didn't panic spray. In the worst second of all our lives, faced with a thing from nightmare, he put 3 rounds exactly where a thing that size keeps whatever's precious to it. The knot, the cluster, the face, calm as a man on a range in the Perth Hills. Crack, 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 slow, deliberate, trusting the rest of us to buy him the time. And we bought it. God, we bought it. Akaffer opened up on the left, that enormous man braced like a wall, and Baker on the right, and Sione stepped up beside Vance, and the sound of 8 men's weapons in that living corridor was the loudest, most human, most defiant noise I have ever been part of. We couldn't kill it. We knew we couldn't kill it, but we could hurt it, and we did, and the thing that had never in its long life been hurt by anything as small as us reared back and screamed. And that scream was the first time the ship made a sound like it was surprised. Up the spine, Vance roared. Move Baker, LINDQVIST, with MEOKFOR, Bloom, hold the door, Geo. We went. That's the trade you make. Some men run at the future, some men stand in the door so the future can happen, and Akaffer and I stood in the door. He looked at me, that big landslide laughing man, and he wasn't laughing now, and he said, Bloom, whatever comes through, it goes through both of us or it doesn't go through. Both of us, I said. Then the thing came again, and we met it. I don't remember all of it. That's honest. The mind takes some things and won't give them back. I remember the heat of it, the copper stink of it, the way it moved so much faster than something that size should. I remember Akaffer beside me being immovable, being a wall, being every reason I'd ever had to feel safe standing next to the biggest bloke in the room. I remember running dry and reloading with hands that didn't shake because there wasn't time to let them. And I remember the moment it got him. One of those too many legs faster than thought, and Akaffer was just moved, flung, and the sound he made wasn't fear, it was fury. And he came up off the floor with his sidearm and put round after round into the cluster at point blank while it had him, buying me the half second, buying the others the corridor, and he was still firing when it. I'm going to leave that there. He was still firing, that's the part I keep, not the rest. He was still firing. OKFOR's down. I screamed it into the net and I heard Vance's voice come back flat and terrible. Keep moving, Bloom, that's an order. Do not stop. And I understood, I did. I understood that stopping meant we all died and Akaffer's stand meant nothing. And so I did the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. I left him. I turned and I ran up the spine of that thing toward the others, and I left the biggest, kindest man I ever knew behind me in the dark. And behind me the thing screamed again, and this time there was something in the scream that I chose to hear as pain. He'd heard it. Akaffer from Blacktown, who could put a chest drain in a bloke under fire without spilling his brew. He'd hurt the thing that gave Earth 9 months to live. Make it earn every one of us. He'd made it earn. Chapter 5, The Brain. We found the brain because Tran led us to it. And Tran led us to it because by then he'd stopped fighting the ship's thoughts and started listening to them. And I think it cost him something to do that. He had a look after, like a man who'd heard a conversation he'd never be able to unhear. It's close, he kept saying, voice frayed. It's close, it's up, we go up. It's like a cortex, boss, it's where all the signals go home to. The passage opened one last time. and we came into the mind of the thing that owned the sky. It was a chamber like the inside of a skull and a star at once, vast, curved, and hung in the center of it a mass of light, a slow-turning knot of that red glow gone brilliant and deep, threaded through with rivers of moving brightness that I understood without being told were thoughts. The clock was in there. Everything was in there. 5 months of studying us, of filing our dead, of counting down our species with the patience of a man clearing out a rental, all of it turned slowly in the dark in front of us, indifferent and enormous, and for the first time within reach. There were 6 of us left. Vance, Lindqvist, Baker, Tran, Sayoni, me. And between us and the brain, one last thing stood guard, smaller than the horror in the corridor but faster, sleeker, made for this, a soldier where the other had been a beast. It didn't drag, it flowed, and it put itself between us and the light, and the message needed no translation. This far, no further. The house is being demolished on schedule. That's when Wolf stepped forward. I'd almost forgotten him in the running. He'd been with us the whole time, silent, keeping up, and now he walked out ahead of all of us toward the Guardian and the brain, and he took off his helmet. Wolf, Vance said, "Get back in the—" "I know how they think," Wolf said. He didn't turn around. "I've been inside them. They left something in me and I've hated it every day since, and this is the only good thing it will ever do." He looked back at us and his 2 still eyes were finally completely calm. "It's curious about me. It's always been curious about me. The one that harvested her, it looked at me and it wondered. A breath. Let me give it something to wonder about. Get to the light. Do the job." And he walked toward the Guardian with his hands open and empty, saying something in that language none of us knew, and the thing hesitated. It hesitated. Curiosity. The same flaw that let 8 men through the front door. It leaned toward him the way you lean toward a thing you don't understand. "Now," Vance bellowed, and we ran. I didn't see what happened to Wolf. I've made my peace with not seeing. He bought us the crossing, the same as Akaffer bought us the corridor, and whatever the ship left in him, it died doing the first and last clean thing it was ever part of. We reached the light. Baker got there first, young Baker, grinning Baker, Demolition's Baker with his mum's laminated photo over his heart, and he already had the charges off his back, and he looked up into that turning galaxy of alien thought and he laughed, this wild, cracked, beautiful laugh, and he said, "Knock, knock." Chapter 6, The Courtesy. Here's the thing nobody down on Earth understood until much later, the thing I've spent the years since trying to explain to people who weren't there. We couldn't destroy the ship. 6 men with what they could carry can't destroy 14 kilometers of living starcraft. That was never the plan. That was never possible. The plan was the clock. The whole eviction, the 9 months, the glass desert, the patient countdown, it wasn't a weapon. It was paperwork. Wolf had understood it, and Tran had heard it in the ship's thoughts, and at the very end I understood it too, standing in the brain of the thing with charges going in around a mind the size of a cathedral. The ship wasn't going to kill us in 9 months. The ship was going to file the notice, and when the notice matured, the demolition would be automatic, lawful, clean. A courtesy. That's what the voice had called it. A courtesy. You can't fight a courtesy with a fleet. But you can make it cost something. Because a mind that curious, a landlord that patient, a thing that keeps its evicted tenants in jars to study them, that thing runs on the certainty that it is never, ever surprised, that nothing small matters, that the maths always works. Its whole existence is built on the maths working. So we broke the maths. Baker set the charges. Tran, listening to the ship think, told him exactly where. Not to destroy the brain, we couldn't, but to sever the one thread, the countdown, the notice, the courtesy, from the rest of the mind. To reach into the paperwork and tear out the clock. And Lindqvist and Sayoni and Vance and I stood in a ring around those 2 working men, and held the last of the dark off them with the last of what we had. And Baker's hands were steady, steady as Lindqvist on the range. Steady as his mum burying banana peels round her roses, And he armed it, and he looked up one last time into the light, and he said, "This is us, and this morning you don't get all of us." Vance's words. Baker gave them back to the sky. Then he blew the clock out of the mind of God. I woke up on the floor of the lander with Sione's huge hand on my chest and Tran screaming that thing to life again with love and filth. And we were falling. We were falling. The ship had spat us out, or we'd run, or both. I still don't fully know, and there were 4 of us in that lander. 4. Vance, Sione, Tran, me. Baker didn't come back from the light. Lindqvist stayed in the door of the brain the way Akaffer stayed in the door of the corridor, so the 4 of us could reach the lander. And the last I saw of that quiet Swede, he was doing the thing he was best in the world at, calm and deliberate, making it earn every round. Akaffer in the corridor, Wolf at the crossing, Lindqvist in the door, Baker in the light. 4 of us fell back to earth, 4 of the 8 names on the whiteboard. We came down hard in the Nullarbor, not 40 kilometers from the glass the ship had made to show us it was serious, and we crawled out of that stolen alien lander onto the red dirt of home under an open sky, and we lay there in the dust and we looked up. The ship was still there, it's still there now if you want the truth. We didn't kill it, you can't kill it. But the clack was gone. The countdown never finished. 9 months came and went and nothing vacated, because somewhere in the mind of the thing that owned us there was a wound now, a torn place where the courtesy used to be, and a landlord that has just been surprised for the first time in its long life is a landlord that has to stop and think. It's been thinking ever since, recalculating, wondering maybe about the small stupid things that flew a stolen ship up its own throat and tore the eviction notice out of its head and asked for nothing, achieved nothing it could measure, saved no one it could name, and changed the maths anyway. We didn't win. I want to be honest with you all the way to the end. We didn't win. The ship still hangs over the southern sky, and one day it may finish its sums and try again. But it gave us 9 months to live, and we gave 4 dead men and 1 who was more than a man, and we bought back the clock. Not forever. Nobody gets forever. Just longer. They ask me sometimes, the young ones, whether it was worth it. 4 of the best men I ever knew, for a stay of execution nobody can measure and everybody can feel. Whether 8 was enough, whether it meant anything against a thing that size. And I think about Baker's roses, his mum in her garden in some suburb, burying banana peels round the roots of flowers, jealous neighbors, a whole small ordinary human life going on under an open sky it wasn't supposed to have. She got another spring, so did 7 billion others. Most of them will never know 4 men's names. That's all right. The dead don't need to be thanked, they just need to have mattered. 8 of us went up to knock on a door that owned the world. And we're the ones who taught it to knock back.